allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please join us in a moment of silence. Thank you. Starting off round one of citizen concerns. This is for concerns that are not already on the agenda. Please keep items discussed to around 3 minutes, and please silence any cell phones. Anybody to be heard for something that's not on the agenda? Come on up. You got to say your name and what is it? Name and address, right, for the record. So.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jasmine Solstice. I'm a downtown resident here in Sioux City for a while now. I have a concern over an event that's taking place on March 12th. I don't know if you guys have seen that at West Norwood Tech in regards to being held by Chris Ann Hall. Chris Ann Hall, I think that's, yeah. I'm just concerned by who's hosting it. It's a group called We the People for Constitutional Sheriffs. I have a history of working well with law enforcement and trying to get things done, so it's not necessarily that I'm against having sheriffs. I want to make that clear. I'm just very concerned with this group that is doing it, and if taxpayers are paying for this training to be done, because the Southern Poverty Law, which I sent an email to Matt just recently that you guys can look over, but they did a study in regards to this group and their correlation to the insurrection on January 6th. They believe that basically the Wild West, where the sheriff rules the county and doesn't have to listen to federal law if they interpret it to be unconstitutional. In this study that the Southern Poverty Law did for the Homeland Security Subcommittee on Civil Rights, they list active number of things that this organization has done that goes against kind of democracy, in my opinion. I would like you guys to look at it, and I'd like there to be an investigation into this event that's being held by the Woodbury Sheriff. So, yeah, that's all.
Anybody else to be heard?
Just to follow up with a little more information.
State your name and address for the agenda.
Jackie Stellish, Sioux City. Good afternoon, Woodbury County Supervisors. I'm here to address my concern of taxpayers funding a training by Chris Ann Hall when she's a clear supporter of the constitutional sheriff's movement. The idea that unites all members of this movement is that a sheriff is the highest law enforcement officer within a county's borders, superior not only to local police, but also to officers and agents of the federal government. After searching, I find no legal basis for sheriff supremacy, and checking with several others who do this for a living, who have studied law enforcement and civilian oversight, a constitutional sheriff with unique autonomy is not actually a thing. The idea has been made up by stitching together random references to sheriffs and militias in our political and legal texts. It relies on a highly selective reading of history, pretending that the High Sheriff of the English Shire was transplanted to colonial America and then somehow emerged in the present day untouched by legal developments over the past 200 years. So why the concern? Michael Barnum, an expert on political extremism, has termed this philosophy radical localism because it valorizes and exploits subnational sources of power. In theory, that kind of localism could be a vehicle for many kinds of politics, but in practice, constitutional sheriffs and their followers tend to occupy the edges of anti-government conservatism, organizing themselves to promote gun rights and property rights, resist tax laws, national health care, oppose gay marriage, and anything else they feel they don't think they should have to follow. In essence, they think they are above the law, therefore lawless. So my question to you is, why are we funding training based in make-believe? Just because someone believes something doesn't make it true. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else to be heard that's not on the agenda?
Joanne Sadler, Correctionville, Iowa. I just wanted to get information from you if you're aware of this event and what your feelings are about it.
I work Saturdays. I don't go to anything.
Well,
I don't know anything about it.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
is there any taxpayer money being used to fund this? No. Sheriff? No. Thank you.
It is being promoted on their Facebook page, so they are supporting it.
I understood she was doing a training for our sheriff's department.
I'll give you the courtesy of not painting with as broad a brush as you painted. Chris Ann Hall was a keynote speaker and trainer at the Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies Association at last year's winter school, which is an annual training held for sheriffs and deputies across the state of Iowa. This is a group that is made up of Republicans, Democrats. I'm not sure if there's any independent sheriffs in the state of Iowa or not, but they're involved in lobbying and stuff like that as far as politics are concerned, and these are elected offices. But these are groups of people from all walks of life who attend these trainings. Chris Ann Hall was brought in as a constitutional attorney to give an educational piece to the members of law enforcement, and she did a training that I attended that was it was on the history of the Constitution and understanding how the Constitution was formed, and making sure that she was challenging us sheriffs, which I would invite you to come to the event, and if you disagree, I will protect your right that is afforded to you in the First Amendment of the Constitution, which isn't given to you by the government, but it's given to you by God, and the Constitution says that it can't be infringed upon. And I will protect you to the death, if necessary, to let you counter anything that she would say that you disagree with, because you have that right to do that. And so while you may have read things on the internet, they can be certainly skewed. I am in no way a person that's above the law. I'm not anti-gay, none of that. And if there's anything that would come out of that meeting that was racist, anti-Semitic, or any of that, I would immediately denounce anything that would come out like that. And anybody that knows me personally would know that that's who I am. And that's not just who I am in front of you or in the public eye. That's who I am behind closed doors. That's how I raise my family. That's how I raise my kids. The only reason that I decided to have Chris Ann Hall come was after I attended the meeting. She was very challenging of us to ensure that we don't lose sight of the fact that we are elected law enforcement officials to ensure that we protect everybody's rights, and that sometimes law enforcement loses sight of perhaps, we get into making arrests and writing tickets and doing those types of things. And really our primary responsibility is to protect every individual's rights. And so that training was meaningful for me. And I'm sure there are things that she probably believes, because she's, I think, I'm not a legal scholar or anything, but I think she more aligns with some of the really conservative Supreme Court justices, either of the past or current, who believe in like a literal translation of the Constitution. And I know that not everybody agrees with that, but for me it was an educational piece for the law enforcement officials in Northwest Iowa, because I learned a lot from it. I felt there were other law enforcement officers that should learn from it. And so I was contacted by a group, by another sheriff who was working with this group. And just so you know, the group that is We the People for Constitutional Sheriffs, it is not a national group. This is just a group of people from eastern Iowa, maybe 10 or 15. I've spoken to one individual, and they want to educate fellow citizens about the Constitution and how liberties. I'm just saying that whatever the Southern Poverty Law, they would have no idea who these 10 or 15 people are.
So
There may be other people out there.
I'm not trying to cut you short here, but we do have set times on the agenda.
Okay.
So we're going to bounce to those.
So there's no public funding. We are having a law enforcement training on the 11th. Because we were doing that for transparency, I wanted to have one open to the public so that you all would know what she was talking about to our law enforcement officials. And so you're welcome, you are all very welcome to attend it.
All right, so we're going to go to item 10A next, which is our 4:35 set time, about 5 minutes late, but public hearing and sale of property parcel known as 1825 West 4th Street. Oh, yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Now we're on 10A, where the public hearing is now open for the sale of 1825 West 4th. Anyone to be heard for or against the sale of this property? It's not the time to make bids, it's just to speak for or against if you want to.
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
I'll second. Motion by Taylor, second by Raddick. Any discussion on closing the public hearing? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. We are now in the sale of 1825 West 4th. If you would like to make a bid on this property, please step up to the microphone. State your name and the amount of your bid. Come on up.
Is that on? Kent Meyer, Sioux City. Whatever the minimum was, it's like 190.
Anyone have that open in front?
190 plus recording fees.
Yeah. 190.
Have anyone else to make a bid on this parcel? Say it's cheaper than my wife's groceries last time.
Hi, my name is Michelle Horton, and I would like to put a bid in, 195. Thank you.
Would you like to counter that? You guys can both stay up there if you're going to go back and forth.
We know each other, so it's not going to be a fight. But I do 300.
He said 300. 305.
Drop 350.
355.
All right.
You got a time on that? No.
We got a time on there.
You got 3 minutes.
500.
Do I want to go that high? No, I don't want to go that high.
All right.
No.
You're just going to cost me money.
I move that the property be sold to Mr. Myers for $500.
Second.
So that was a motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. Was that what it was? All right. Any further discussion on that? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you both. Moving on to, we got public hearing, sale of property for 1309 West 14th. We are now in the public hearing. Anyone to speak for or against the sale of that parcel?
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt, to close public hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. We're now in the sale of 1309 West 14th. Is there anyone who would like to make a bid? Come on up, state your name, your bid amount.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I'm from Latin, Iowa, and I want to play the bid for 250.
What was it?
250.
250? It was Salisa. What was the last name?
Camacho.
All right, anybody else to make a bid? For 251, you could outbid her, or 255. That's teasing.
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the property be sold to Ms. Camacho for $250.
Second. Okay, we got a motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That passes 5-0. Moving on to item C, which is, yes, $250 plus fees or whatever. So. Public hearing and sale of property known as 3200 Leach Avenue. We're in the public hearing. Anyone to speak for or against the sale of 3200 Leach Avenue? All right.
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
Second.
All right, motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. We're now in the sale of 3200 Leach Avenue. Go ahead and state your name and your bid.
Doing me here on that said property, and I, put in a bid on that.
All right. What was your name again?
Dennis Cloud.
Dennis Cloud. And what's your bid there, Dennis?
They have it down as 300.
Okay, so we got 300. Anyone else want to bid on this property here? It's a sweet deal, guys.
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the property be sold to Mr. Cloud for $300.
Second.
All right, got a motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt to sell to Dennis Cloud for $300. Any discussion on the item? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes 5-0. We have a 4:45 set time now. Thank you. Go ahead and you guys can meet with Heather right there. She's got the black sweater on there and the envelopes of importance. Thank you very much. The county is now $1,050 richer. So 11A, which is our public hearing on development agreement and tax increment payments to AG Processing, Inc.
Good evening, Supervisors. David Gleiser, Director of Community Economic Development. This is pretty much the last step that we need to take to finalize our commitment to AGP for their $70 million expansion.
So
Outside of the public hearing, we will pass a resolution to formalize the county's commitment. That will come in the form of up to $1 million in tax increment financing rebate payments made to AGP for over 5 years, and the potential to spend up to $10,000 in administrative fees.
all right, we're in the public hearing. Anyone to be heard on that?
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
Second. Okay. Motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. Any further discussion from the board on that? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes 5-0. Moving on to B, which is the resolution approving development agreement with AG Processing, Inc., authorizing tax increment payments and pledging certain tax increment revenues to the payment of the agreement.
This formalizes it all in writing, and I would like to submit formally to the board for you to receive an updated, revised copy. The company and I had worked over the last 24 hours on some very small, immaterial, not substantive changes to the document, more or less some name block signature changes, how the company wanted their name to be read, and then some other clarifying language that I worked with bond counsel. But I would like to submit these for the board and the public to formally be received, and that would be the formal document that we would execute.
I move to receive.
Second. Second. All right, we have a motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Any further discussion? So on receiving the document, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. So now we're back to the resolution approving the agreement.
I move to approve it.
All right, so I'll second that. We have a motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Any discussion? I know we've hit this a few meetings now. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item C, was authorized chairman to sign development agreement with AG Processing, Inc. I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by Radig, second by Taylor. Any discussion on that?
So the board knows, once I have your signatures, I'll send 2 original copies to AGP for them to execute, and then send us back 1 original, and then I'll record that in the recorder's office.
Sounds great. All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? And that passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to jump back all the way to citizen concerns. Anything that needed to be said that's not on the agenda. If you spoke and wanted, I don't know if Chad, you can speak up there with individuals outside the meeting.
I think I've said everything I think I answered.
All right.
To the point of sheriff authority and power run amok, just go back and watch a couple of the last few meetings. I think it goes to show there's been some pretty spirited discussions between the people in this room. There's been a lot of back and forth, and so I think there's a lot of people in here who would check the sheriff's authority if it came to that.
Yeah, we all work together and check each other as far as the balance, and even I had to be reminded not to use the second door. So, Maria, did you have something there?
Yes, coming back with the sheriff's promoting this person. I spoke with Chad previously about this issue. He told me that it's a private donor that is sponsoring this. I will suggest to Chad that to reveal the private donor to the public, because it's open to the public in a public building. So it would be nice if you reveal your private donor. That's all.
I would have to speak to them to see if they want to be revealed or not. They're an anonymous private donor.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else to speak?
Thank you.
Come on up, sir. Mr. Alexander.
Kim Alexander from Smithland. I appreciate you all coming up and raising the questions. I appreciate Sheriff's response. Once upon a time in America, free debate and rigorous debate was like sacrosanct. You could not, it was just a given. You bring your idea out into the public forum, you speak about it, you hear both sides, and then you decide. It's only in the last 5-10 years that cancel culture has said, no, we're not even going to let the other side speak. We don't want to hear it. Ideas are dangerous. They have consequences. So I would challenge you all, let's revive the old-fashioned liberal way of doing things, liberal in the open, free sense, and let's hear the debate and let's make our decisions based on hearing both sides, not by canceling. Thank you.
Thank you. And that being said, we do have a business meeting. Anything to be said? Again, like I said, not on the agenda. It's not here to debate each other, but anything not on the agenda. All right, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Items 4 through 9 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items passed unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 4 is the approval of the minutes of the February 22 of 2022 meeting. Number 5 is approval of claims. Item 6 from Board Administration is approval of resolution for tax suspension for initials JE. Item 7 from Board Administration, approval notice of property sale for resolution sale resolution for sale of Woodbury County Farm on March 15th, 2022 at 4:40 p.m. and sale date for March 22nd, 2022 at 10 a.m. Item 8 from Human Resources. A is approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. 8B, authorization to initiate hiring process. Item 9 from the county treasurer. A is approved property tax refund request for parcel 84705256007 in the amount of $773. And item B is approval of resolution naming depositories. Anything to be discussed as far as the consent agenda goes?
I move approval of consent agenda.
Second for discussion.
All right, so we have a motion by DeWitt, second by Taylor, and a little discussion question.
Just to clarify for the public, so the property sale resolution is when we will resolve formally to sell the property, but the actual sale is at 10 a.m. on March 22nd, and I'm seeing some advertising already. Sir, did you have a question toward that end?
About the sale of the county farm.
Yes, sir.
Come on up and state your name.
Prompted the sale
So,
of the land out there.
go ahead and
My
state.
name's Jim Collier. I live at 1650 Old Highway 141, right next to the county home. And I just wondered what prompted the sale of that.
I can
Go ahead.
answer that if I- So it's something that we've looked at over the last 2 to 3 years.
Sure.
And its original origin being for indigent or those who are, and instead of holding public land and getting about $65,000, $68,000 a year,
Right.
with land value as high as it is, seems like returning it to those private farmers and industry would be apropos, as well as we're facing a very difficult budget year this year and next before the county jail is built. This will allow us to receive some revenue in order to be able to provide a bridge toward when that future revenue can come in and hold the line on property taxes. That, I think, is the long and short of the board's position.
Okay, I was just curious if it was prompted by the pipeline.
Absolutely not. And one of the things, just to support that and to give you a little peace of mind on that, we've been talking about this for 2.5 years as far as banding and about back and forth. So in no way, shape, form, or fashion does it have to do with that.
Right. Well, and if it was, I can understand why. You know, because it brings up a lot of unnecessary stuff for the board to deal with. As far as I'm concerned as a landowner, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just curious to, you know, the why.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised the question, but the answer, I think, on our behalf would all be no.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other discussion on anything on the consent agenda? All right, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes 5-0. Moving on to item 12, presentation of Summit Carbon Solutions. Come on up, sir, and try to keep her short for the agenda if you could.
So my name's Eric Skubanek. I'm with Summit Carbon Solutions. Thank you, Woodbury Supervisors, for giving us the time to speak. I do have some. Let me go through a presentation. Do you guys? I made copies for everybody. I can hand these out.
Give them all to us. I'd move to receive.
Second.
Thank you.
So there is a PowerPoint presentation, and then there's just some flyers on the back. I'm going to go through the PowerPoint.
Oh, sorry, 1 second. So we had a motion by Taylor, second by Radig. All those, and any discussion on receiving this? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So again, I'm Eric Skubanek. I'm the Director of Pipeline and Facilities for Summit Carbon Solutions. So Summit Carbon Solutions was formed really last year when the company was stood up. Our parent company is Summit Agriculture, and we're endeavoring to build the world's largest carbon capture and sequestration project. And so what that amounts to is we've got offtake agreements with 31 ethanol plants across the Midwest, and we've got commitments of roughly 9 million tons of CO2. It's about 8.7. And essentially what the project is a large gathering system across the 5 Midwestern states that we touch, which is Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Minnesota. The pipe system gathers all the CO2 and ultimately is being stored and sequestered permanently in North Dakota. So there is a slide here talking about a video. So we've got a 3 or 4 minute video that's on our website, summitcarbonsolutions.com. Welcome you guys to go check it out and look at it. And so really the next slide is talking about, what is the reason for this project? Why are we doing this? The real reason is that, we want farmers and we want there to be an end market for corn and ethanol to be healthy for decades to come. So, what does that mean? So right now, ethanol plants, there's a CI score, carbon intensity score. So ethanol plants have one of the highest carbon intensity scores of all industrial facilities. And everyone knows that we're moving towards a low carbon footprint world, and ethanol plants are going to have a target on their back as we move and transition into a low carbon future. So what this project is essentially, right now, when you make ethanol, if you bring in 30 pounds of corn, you're going to make 10 pounds of ethanol, you're going to make 10 pounds of DDGs, and then 10 pounds is going to go to the atmosphere as CO2. So this project is capturing that CO2 before it goes to the atmosphere, running it through a series of compressors to pressure it up, put it into the pipeline into a liquid form or a dense phase form, and then migrating that up to North Dakota to permanently store downhole. When we cut that CI score in half for the ethanol plants, then they can then sell that ethanol into the low carbon fuels market on the West Coast, and they can get a premium up to 40 cents a gallon for the ethanol. So that's the value proposition here, is that roughly 80% of the revenue is from that uplift on the ethanol, selling that into the low carbon fuel market. And so we share in that cost with the ethanol plants, and it's roughly 40 cents a gallon. There's about 10 to 15 cents of logistics cost, and then we split it. So it's 10 to 15 cents each per gallon. Some of these ethanol plants are 100 million gallons plus, so you can see that there's a value for them as well. They're putting up none of the capital. So I'll just continue on through the presentation here. So I put a map of Woodbury County. So there's roughly 20 miles of pipe in Woodbury County. It skirts the southern part of Sioux City and then heads north to Plymouth County, where there's Plymouth Energy is an ethanol plant that's there in Plymouth. It's 12-inch pipe. The pipe in our system ranges from 4-inch to 24-inch. Iowa is mostly smaller diameter pipe as it's being gathered and heads northwest. We do get into some 20-inch pipe in the far northwest corner of Iowa. So we've got, again, as I mentioned earlier, 31 partner plants. 12 of those are in the state of Iowa, and there's roughly 700 miles of pipe in Iowa. Again, there's a slide here showing, the input of the corn and the output of the ethanol and the CO2 and what the opportunity looks like and why there's value in that. And here's some, economic statistics on ethanol. So I'm not sure everyone's aware, but over 50% of the corn crop in Iowa goes to ethanol production. So having that healthy end market for corn is important. And if ethanol can't compete long-term in a low-carbon fuel market, and they go away, the end market goes away, the corn prices drop, land values go down. That's really the purpose of the project is with that in mind. Our parent company is an agriculture company. They farm land, and that's really why this project was thought of, was to have that end market healthy for ethanol and for corn. So just in the state of Iowa, there's $4.5 billion of GDP from ethanol, and there's over 44,000 jobs that are tied to ethanol plants. So it's very important that ethanol plants are healthy long-term. This next slide here is just showing the low-carbon fuel market right now. It's currently on the West Coast. It's a growing market. It's an emerging market. There's other states that are looking at adding this, I guess, as part of their requirements for their fuel. Iowa is one of those states. So there's, the economic impacts that I mentioned earlier, but there's also environmental impacts. So The 12 million tons that this system would be moving when it's fully built out is equivalent of taking roughly 2.6 million cars off the road. So again, you're not sending that CO2 to atmosphere, you're sending it downhole permanently. The project itself is roughly $4.5 billion. It's privately funded. There's some public investors, such as John Deere and others that have invested in the project. And, you know, one question that we do get a lot is, you know, what's the revenue stream? I did mention the uplift on the ethanol, and that's the primary driver for the revenue. There is a 45Q tax credit for every ton of CO2 that you send downhole permanently and sequester. There's a $50 a ton credit, and there's generally bipartisan support for that. It was actually put into effect under the Trump administration. Again, the project itself, physically being built out, each ethanol plant will have what we're calling a capture facility, where you're capturing that CO2, you're processing it, you're getting the water out, you're pressuring it up, and you're putting it into the pipeline. All of that project work and equipment is being funded by us. The ethanol plants are putting up no capital, and then we're building a large infrastructure pipeline across 5 states that is between 1,900 and 2,000 miles. We anticipate the project to employ roughly 17,000 people when the project is being built. Most of those are going to be construction jobs. When those jobs are going on, those people will be staying in the communities. They'll be eating at the restaurants. They'll be, you know, buying, you know, stuff from the hardware store. So there'll be a major influx of money into the communities that this project impacts. And, you know, a lot of people have said that, you know, well, those are just temporary jobs. You know, we plan on using union labor in Iowa, so as a requirement of that, they're required to hire 50% local. So that's, you know, thousands of jobs, construction jobs that would be hired locally. And we've got support from the union contractors. And then there's also planned to be between 350 and 450 permanent jobs when we go into service. Operations jobs, you know, mechanical jobs such as pump technicians, electrical technicians, et cetera. We're based out of Ames, Iowa, so we're an Iowa company. So I'll keep moving on here. So again, this kind of highlights the 3 different pieces of it. So you've got the capture and compression, you've got the pipeline transportation, and then you've got the geologic storage. Obviously, as you move on to the next slide, safety is paramount to us. This project can't happen and won't happen if it's not done the right way and it's not done safe. CO2 pipelines are not new. It's not a novel idea. There's over 5,000 miles of CO2 pipelines in the U.S. Some of them have been in service for almost 30 years. Mostly in enhanced oil recovery type operations in Texas and Wyoming and otherwise. But it's not new technology. It's carbon steel pipe, it's pumps, it's valves, it's compressors. It's the same equipment that you would have for a water pipeline or a crude oil line or a natural gas pipeline. There's nothing new there. There's nothing novel about the technology that we're looking to employ. CO2 is unique that are different than natural gas, for example, that it's non-flammable, it's non-combustible. If you were to strike the pipeline, it's not going to explode. You know, it's a very safe product to move. There's been 0 fatalities in the history of CO2 pipelines. And even further, we're going to be regulated by PHMSA and the Department of Transportation. So we're going to be under the same federal regulations as natural gas pipelines, as ethane pipelines, as crude lines. We have to follow all those same design requirements. And we're actually going above and beyond on the design and with safety in mind. So for example, you know, the minimum depth of cover is 3 feet. We're going 4 feet. We're crossing a lot of ag property. We want to make sure that there's no impacts to the pipeline. You're required to x-ray 10% of the welds. We're x-raying 100% of the welds. You know, safety is very, very critical. We're going to have a very sophisticated leak detection system where we've got measurement, custody transfer quality measurement coming in at every single ethanol plant, and then periodically down the pipeline, and then at the end point in North Dakota. So we'll have a control center in Iowa, in Ames, and they're going to be monitoring the pipeline 24/7, 365. If there's an upset condition on flow rate, on pressures, on anything of that nature, there'll be almost 200 motor-operated block valves on the pipeline that they'll be able to shut instantly and remotely. So there's a lot of things that we're doing with safety in mind. The pipe's going to have corrosion-resistant coating. We're going to have integrity engineers on the staff. You know, safety is very critical for us. Moving on, so, you know, this isn't my area of expertise, but there's a slide here on the geologic sequestration. Essentially, you know.
Eric, on this too, we can't have you get it wrapped up. I know we got more to do.
Oh, I'll try to make it quick then. You said 2 more minutes?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay, yeah, let's go quick then. So, you know, compensation for landowners. So we did a market data study for every single county across the entire footprint. We got that data back and we assessed 115% value of that. We're seeking a 50-foot permanent easement and a 50-foot temporary easement. So that 115% value are applying to the permanent easement and half of that to the temporary easement. And then we're paying a 3-year crop damage structure where we pay 100%, 80% and 60% over 3 years. That's paid ahead of construction, and the easement would be paid when you signed. So we're essentially paying as if we're buying the land, and as soon as we're done with the construction, there's full use of it outside of building a structure or putting, you know, a tree over it. You could build a road over it, you could farm it, you can use it for pasture, you can use it for whatever you need to besides building a permanent structure over the pipeline. So drain tile we know is really critical for everyone that has tiling in their fields, pattern tile. I won't get into all the details, but we have enlisted a very large Ellingson Construction. They're one of the largest drain tile contractors in the U.S. They're going to help us manage this effort. We take drain tile very critically. We actually added an exhibit in the easement that says we're going to warranty drain tile and terraces indefinitely. I mean, I've worked for a lot of pipeline companies. I've never seen that. They're going to warranty drain tiles, or we're going to warranty drain tiles for perpetuity if it's tied to our project. Some key takeaways here, you know, $4.5 billion capital investment across 5 states. It's going to be a huge influx of money in all these communities. 14,000 to 18,000 jobs, and, you know, having an end market for ethanol, for corn to produce ethanol, where 50% of the corn in the state is going to, is extremely important, and that's really the basis for the project. And again, we're utilizing proven, safe technology and equipment, and that's really the keys there. So sorry to rush through this at the end or taking up too much time here, but.
Not a problem. We just had we got another presentation, and I know the guy's waiting on the line too, so.
So I've attached my information. Certainly if there's any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me at any point. That's really it. So thanks again for giving us time to give you all information on this. We know that this is something we probably should have done earlier. We had a very small team that was assembled, and I started in June. I was like the 4th person hired. We're now up to 35, 40 people. So the team's growing, and we're getting our outreach a lot more. So you should start hearing from us as far as the non-environmental permitting stuff, you know, reaching out to county engineers, the drainage districts, water districts, and we're really ramping up those efforts. So we know we hadn't reached out to many people previously, and so apologize for not doing this sooner, but, you know, if there's any questions, please feel free to send me an email or give me a call at any point.
And, you know, I guess personally, as far as my opinion goes, I'm not against your project. I'm against just the fact that there's eminent domain involved. And I think that's where a lot of the board concern comes with the project. I mean, if it's a viable project from a profitable company, then we think
Yeah,
the land should be
understood.
bought.
I mean, we're seeking voluntary easements, that's our goal.
Sure. And then, I'm sure there might be some people here to ask questions for you.
I mean, I can go upstairs.
Yeah, and I would appreciate that if you could, because, we'd like to, move on with the agenda here, but anybody that has questions of Mr. Shanovic, did I say that right?
It's
Close
Skubanek,
enough.
it doesn't look like it, but
All right.
one last thing I would mention is there's going to be a significant amount of property taxes that we're going to pay as a result of this project, tens of millions of dollars per year across the footprint of the project. So I wanted to make that known that there is significant impacts at the county level even for property taxes and otherwise that we're going to have to pay. So, thanks for the time again. And
You bet.
I will go upstairs and answer questions and stick around as long as I need to. So thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just say one quick thing about the boards voting on this previously?
Come on up to the mic and just
In the past, when this came up, Kim Alexander Smithland, in the past, when this came up, you guys voted unanimously against this thing, right?
put basically a letter to
the IUB in support of landowners' rights.
Yes. Stand firm. Do not back up an inch. This is the biggest scam I have seen in my life. I appreciate you all doing that. Stand firm.
So to move on the agenda, item 13A, approval of is this you want the guy to speak before this?
I can introduce and then
All right.
if you have them on the line.
Well, this 13A is approval of resolution supporting HF 2430, a bill for an act relating to methods of determining compensation of elected county officers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is a resolution supporting a bill that I think has very good legs in the Iowa House and really addresses the way that counties compensate elected officials. County compensation boards, in my opinion, are antiquated, and the current way that they mandate boards of supervisors to tie all elected officials together, I believe is a poor service to taxpayers and very unfair. So you can see if you just look at the news across Iowa's 99 counties, they're making a lot of news and comments from supervisors in relationship to comp board recommendations, and it's reflective of a system that needs serious reform. So Lucas speaking from ISACs, if he's on the line, can maybe give us a little bit of an update as to what House File 2430 does, where it stands, and then I'll talk a little bit about the resolution.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. This is Lucas Finken with the Iowa State Association of Counties. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have seen me at our events speaking and attending. I know what I'm talking about. So we're going to try that again tonight. I've been with the government relations team at ISAC since 2013, and before that I served on the Wright County Board of Supervisors. So certainly not a newbie to the compensation board. We've actually got a couple bills moving right now that are different, one in the Senate, one in the House. And I know the topic that is before you tonight is on the House file. So I would like to speak on the Senate file very quickly first, and then I'll go into detail on the House file and answer questions I have. But Senate file 283 has made it out of the committee. It's on the calendar for the full Senate now, and this does two main things. It is the first is the compensation board shall consider the current economic health of the county, state, and country. And then the second item is what we're calling the show your work. So the comp board basically has to demonstrate how they came up with the recommendation that they did. The second part we are in favor of. The first part we are not. So ISAC, the Association of County Supervisors, ISAC, and the Association of County Auditors, ISACA, are all registered against this bill currently. And I'll stop there and give you just a little piece of information. So I'm employed by ISAC. We have contracts with the Association of County Supervisors and the county auditors to do their lobbying work. So when I talk about all three organizations, we represent them. So ISAC has that contract with those two affiliates to represent them. Sometimes the registrations are different, so I'll note that when it's applicable. So on this Senate file, all three registered again, because of that language about considering the economic health, we strongly believe that that is your job as county supervisors. Now, it is frustrating, I know, as a supervisor to get those recommendations from the comp board. I'm not sure if this has happened in Woodbury County, but you know, the comp board gets in this mindset, well, the supervisors are going to do what they want anyway, so we'll just throw out 15%, and then, you know, they can always go lower, so they can figure it out. Well, that's the comp board not doing their job, right? So that gets back to the second piece where, okay, justify your recommendations. So we do like that, but to say, you know, consider the economic health, in other words, hey, don't come at us with a huge recommendation because our budget can't handle that, that's not the job of the compensation board. They're supposed to look at the position and figure out what that position's wages should be. The supervisors can then focus on economic health and their budget. So the separation of those duties we think is very important. We're currently registered, all three organizations, against that bill. If they got rid of the economic health language and just kept the, again, for lack of a better term, show your work piece, we would probably switch to in favor of that. On the House side, different approach, House File 2430, and this does a number of things. Before I explain that, I'll let you know the Association of County Supervisors is registered in favor. The Association of Counties and County Auditors registered undecided, which is basically in the registration system just saying that we're neutral. There are things that we're working on. We might like this part and not like that part. A lot of reasons to go undecided, and this bill would be no different. There are some things I think other elected officials like, some pieces that they don't like, so we're undecided on the bill from the ISAC and ISAC perspective, but the supervisors are in favor. So what does it do? The first thing, and the biggest thing, is if you want to keep your compensation board and use them, you get to. If you want to get rid of the compensation board and take on those duties as a board of supervisors, you can do that as well. So it's basically putting the power in the hands of the board of supervisors to decide, are we getting, is it useful to have the compensation board? Are they doing their job? Are they doing something that is of benefit to us? Or are we a board that says, you know, we're not really seeing the benefit here. Why don't we just do this ourselves? And there will be, you know, if this becomes law, there will be counties that go both ways, meaning some counties will say, why don't we just have the board do this? Others will say, you know, we really appreciate them doing the homework, coming up with good recommendations, and then we have an idea of what the position is supposed to be paid or what they think the position should be paid, and we figure out how to work that with our budget. So that's the first piece. The second piece I'll point out, and this actually came through an amendment the last time it was considered in subcommittee, and that is all of the requirements currently in code for the compensation board. In the original bill, that was tossed out. In the new bill, it puts it back in saying if the Board of Supervisors chooses to have a compensation board, they need to follow all of the steps and all of the requirements that are in current code. So you can get rid of it if you want, but if you keep it, then you have to follow the rules that are currently in place. Now, regardless of whether there's a compensation board or not, it does make changes, and Jeremy, I think you kind of alluded to this in your resolution. It makes changes to treating all of the offices the same. And that has been a big complaint from supervisors in the past because they're trying to figure out, okay, if you get a recommendation of, let's say, 5%, that means everyone gets 5%, or everyone gets 4%, or everyone gets 3%, you know, and then let's say they're not all the same. So you're dealing with an 8, a 6, and a 4. Then you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we reduce them all the same? So what this bill does is says they don't all have to be treated the same. You can go lower than the comp board recommendation, or you can go higher than the comp board recommendation. Of course, you would always accept the comp board recommendation, but there's no longer that limit on having to go under if you're going to adjust it, and there's no requirement that all elected offices are raised, lowered, whatever, at the same percentage. So it gives you that flexibility to sort out when you're looking at the other elected officials. I guess I'll pause briefly and ask if there are any questions to this point.
What do you think the support level is in the legislature at this point? Any updates?
So yeah, that's a good question. So it does seem to be moving, and as you might recall, there have been bills in the past, and how should I delicately say this in a public meeting? There hasn't been a lot of effort put into those bills. It's basically just the legislature saying, oh, just get rid of the comp board. And I think there's a real lack of effort when they do that, because that's not necessarily a fix. That's not right for every county. So to see something that they're actually putting thought into, I think that gives it a little bit more momentum because we know that the system is not perfect. Our executive director will say it's the worst system anyone could imagine, but no one has ever come up with something that's better. And I think what he means by that is, yeah, we realize that there are issues with the way that it's currently set up, but what's the better plan? What's the proposed solution? And there hasn't been one. I don't think county officials are interested in the legislature determining their salary, or gosh, do we put it on the ballot and let the voters decide every year? Probably not, right? So it's a system that is imperfect, but it does work. And I think this bill, from the perspective of the supervisors, would allow them to figure out if the comp board structure is working for their county, or if they would rather take on those responsibilities themselves. So that's the long way of saying I think it's more thoughtful than those in the past, and so I think it has a better chance of moving than the very simple just get rid of the compensation board legislation we've seen in the past.
Anybody else?
So on this one, I may have mentioned this, but so the supervisors are registered in favor. ISAC and ISACA registered undecided. The bill already does have the support of the county supervisors. So I think what you're considering tonight is a resolution that would basically say Woodbury County agrees with that, supportive of the legislation, and then you were planning to send that on to the legislature. So that's not unheard of. Counties have done that in the past on certain issues, so nothing really out of the ordinary there.
Well, I think we got all the questions we needed from you. So, is there anybody else that had anything?
Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it, Lucas.
You bet. That's it for me. I'll probably hang on and listen. So if anything happens to come up, I'll probably still be on. So if you have anything, just holler.
Go ahead with talk
No.
about it.
So we'll just move ahead with the agenda item here, I guess, as far as, I don't have any questions for him, so.
If I can address what the resolution states for the good of the public. So one of the impetuses for this is to make sure it's fair, efficient, and conscientious of the total resources of taxpayers, something the Compensation Board recommendations don't account for. We've looked at 2.25 to 2.75 as the current union wage, and we sought to put that up to about 4%. We did the same for wage plan. We're looking at between 6 and 30% for elected officials, which is out of line in terms of the recommendation in comparison to what nearly everybody's making in terms of a wage increase. Nationally, and this is the highest, I want people to understand, this is the highest in decades. 3.4% is what people are realizing as increases this year. Nowhere near 6 or 10 or 20 or 30. So this would seek to allow us to take the fiduciary responsibility and take into account the economic health and tax climate of the county, state, and country when determining compensation, to not just look at what we hear all the time, which is this person over here, and they've got this population is making this, and therefore it follows that I should make that. It's a very simplistic way of looking at it when there's about 10 or 12 other factors that we could consider. And we could also go up. We'd have the freedom to do so. In fact, I talked to Representative Bloomingdale today, and I thought that this was excellent. She said that they're considering advocating for a higher percentage for deputies, which means that instead of 85%, it could be 90, it could be 95%, which I think is also laudable. But right now, our board is painted into a corner, and this would give us a lot more freedom to do what's right by taxpayers and to make autonomous decisions. And so you have the resolution. I won't read it, but I mentioned basically the key points.
Mr. Chair. Just a question, is the raise to 95% you mentioned considered going to be considered in this legislation or just in the future?
I believe it'll be amended on the floor. So this is passed out of House Committee and will be taken up on the floor. And if that amendment is offered, of course, it'll be whether the body approves that amendment, but could possibly be taken up. Something that I don't think, given the comments of many elected officials, that any elected official would oppose, having deputies be 95% rather than 85%.
Effective in what budget year?
Depends on if it's immediate upon enactment or after July 1st when statutory bills would normally go into effect. So probably not for this, probably not for right now in this year.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
The current way that Iowa law mandates county compensation boards is antiquated and is a poor service to taxpayers. I think that's your opinion.
Absolutely.
That is not set in stone. It is very unfair. A cursory glance of happenings in counties that are making news and comments made by supervisors in relationship. I mean, the way this is presented is just like it's cut and dried and that that's the end of the story, period, dot. In the first place, the comp board doesn't have anything to do with union wages. So you keep bringing that up as the unions are getting X, whatever, and that's all fine and good, but comp boards have absolutely zero to do with unions, so I'm not finding the real reason that you're bringing that up. So
Bringing it up because I think every union member would love to have a comp board.
Well,
they don't. The average Joe doesn't get to have a 6 to 30% increase. They go to the bargaining table. So I'm just making the comparison of how unfair I believe it is.
Okay, can I continue?
Mm-hmm.
Seems to me that in the spirit of transparency, the comp board should remain. Because from things that have happened so far this year, if we had absolute full control as a board of supervisors, it looks like this could easily be weaponized. And I don't like that at all. I can't support this resolution, not even a little. So to go on ahead and say that this was passed unanimously would be false. because I don't see any reason to, I just don't see it. This looks like it's far too easy to weaponize the Board of Supervisors against some other elected or some whoever that they don't like, and they can stand behind this and say, well, the legislature got rid of the comp boards for us, so we can do what we want. We can even go up. But I doubt that'll ever happen.
All right, Abe.
I was just going to make a, were you going to say something if you wanted to?
Can I put a question in regards to it? Yeah, I just want a little bit of clarification. So if this resolution passes, does that automatically mean that we need to budget for that in the continuous years? Because this was kind of, if it's being implemented right away for whatever amount of increase that we're talking about, we haven't really had the opportunity to put that into our budget to make sure that it's economically solvable for the community. So I'm just
An
a little
excellent
bit.
question. It won't have an effect this budget year. So this is something that we're lobbying the legislature for, which most likely will have an effect next year. And just to be clear, the property tax implication could very well be better or more favorable. Part of the resolution right now is that we get a recommendation from a board, and they say that there's a 31.15% increase for the sheriff as an elected official, 22% for these county supervisors, for us, 13% for your county auditor, 9% for your county.
That's not true.
I'm sorry, county attorney, I misspoke. 9% for your county auditor, 9% for your county treasurer. Those are the raises. If we want to decrease that, ma'am, we can only do by a like percentage. So if we say we'll reduce it by 50%, then the sheriff will go from 31.15, and I'm not great at math, to about 15.5%. All of these wages, and these increases by percent, are 5 times, 10 times what 95% of our employees are looking at. They're looking at about 3 or 4%. That's the system that we have right now.
And that's because of the...
Because of current law, because the way Iowa code is currently.
Yeah.
What we're asking for is the autonomy to say, you know what, maybe because of the economic health, maybe because of the property taxes that people are being levied, maybe it's more appropriate to be at 5 or 6 or 7% rather than have to decrease it equally like that. Bottom line is elected officials are looking at raises that our 95% of our workers could only dream of, but will never have the opportunity to see.
Good.
All right, that clarifies my question.
And I would say as soon as anybody up here would weaponize this, I would expect the Journal to write an article really, really quickly. And then the next thing I would expect is that the voters would vote that clown out. If anybody's behaving that way, vote them out the next time that there's an election. So you're going to have a commitment. You've got a commitment from, you got to decide if you trust us to do this or not.
Would we be able to, say if we feel that way, go to Iowa?
Come up for the question, just so it's, you got to have the microphone.
Okay, so if we were to have an issue thinking that maybe they were favoring one person, let's say there was ill will going on there, then would we be able to go to the Iowa Ethics Board Committee? And so there's routes of making sure that it's held accountable if people feel like the board isn't
I'd be the
necessary.
first one to sign your petition, because that's the kind of garbage that has no place.
Okay.
It's just this type of body.
So there are resources to make sure that things are held accountable, but also to where we can make sure that for this specific county, the Board of Supervisors who's in charge of the annual budget has a little bit more control in regards to what the House and Senate are passing.
That would not be appropriate to go to the Ethics Board.
It wouldn't
That
be
would
appropriate?
not. They would not accept that.
Okay. So there wouldn't be, what route would be for accountability?
Public sentiment, vote them out.
All of these meetings are public meetings, so these decisions are discussed and voted upon in public meetings.
Fry them on Facebook.
couple thoughts. It's mentioned repeatedly about the desire to take in and consider the economic state when that seems to be the driving force of the support for this resolution. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that would be in no small part.
Okay. Then I would point out the gentleman that spoke said that that is exactly the reason that all three bodies were against the Senate file.
I'm glad he stayed on
because
the
it
line
already-
because they're
because-
talking about the comp board.
Because it
not
already exists in your authority to consider the economic health. The only reason they all three opposed, the one was because of the first paragraph that talks specifically about the economic health. You already possess that power as it exists currently. That's exactly what he said. You can go back and watch it. It's exactly what he said.
Mr.
It's
Chair,
an
is he
excuse.
still on the
Hold on.
I'm just
Okay, go
asking
ahead.
for
Sorry. Yep,
clarification
yep,
because
yep.
he said that the comp board, Chad, the comp board shall consider that.
No.
That's,
No.
is he still on the line?
He said that all
Lucas,
three-
if you could clarify the Senate study bill that our sheriff is referring to, you're registered opposed because it said that the comp board shall consider. Is that correct?
That's right, because
Okay.
is he still on? He's still on. And it was because you already possess that power. As the law exists today, the reason you want to change it, you already have. And that's exactly the reason they opposed it. Can you comment, sir? Have I misunderstood, or I don't want to misstate what you stated?
Yes, this is Lucas again. So yes, the Senate file puts in that the compensation board shall consider the current economic health of the county, state, and country. And our opposition to that is we believe the compensation board should look at the position and what it should be paid, and then things like economic health, budget issues like that fall to the Board of Supervisors, and there should be a clear distinction in those duties on who's doing what. And if I can, I'll just tell you, we believe that a lot of decisions are made with the Board of Supervisors after they get the compensation board recommendation. They have to figure out their budget, right? So they're doing that. What we don't want to see happen is the compensation board trying to figure out, okay, what's the position, what should they be paid, and then, oh, well, the budget isn't doing so good, so we're going to recommend, let's say, 1.5 this year. Under current law, the Board of Supervisors is now at 1.5 or below in what they can do for themselves and the other elected officials. They have nowhere to go, right? If the comp board says 1.5, that's the ceiling. So we're saying to the comp board, figure out what the position should be paid and make that recommendation. Don't, as a comp board, you should not be concerned with the economic health of the county, state, country, or any budgetary matters. That's the Board of Supervisors.
Right. So am I accurate in stating that your statement earlier, because I wrote it down, was that all three were against this bill because of the portion in the beginning that was trying to put the burden of the economic health onto the comp board, and that is the responsibility of the Board of Supervisors, and that they currently have that authority right now?
Yes, so that's the reason for our opposition is the separation of powers there.
Thank you. That is my whole purpose of what I would plead to not be in support of this resolution. The purpose is to have autonomy. And the fear for me is that the autonomy will be lost because it will be the responsibility of all the other elected officials to please the five kings that sit up here every year. Because if you wanted to run Pat Gill out, you could cut his salary to $50,000. And of course, you could be voted out 3 years later, but there would be nothing that would prevent that from happening.
Litigation.
And it's been done in state government. It's a major loss.
Litigation would prevent that from happening.
Not until later. It happened at the state level, okay? The raises out of line. The raises are out of line. It's been another thing that's been mentioned repeatedly. I would just reiterate my point from earlier. The raises are out of line because the wages have fallen so far behind over the years. And when you say that the unions don't have a comp board, you're right. They have you, and they've negotiated their wages with all of you over the last 20 years. You could have kept them up, and you didn't. You all had that, and not you, that's unfair. Not all of you have been up here for that long. But so to make it so simplistic to say that if they had a comp board, they would get more, well, they have a board of supervisors that they negotiate their wages with every 2 or 3 years. So I think it shouldn't be lost that, to me, the only thing that changes with this is it gives the Board of Supervisors much more power over the other elected officials. And in the checks and balances that we were talking about earlier, that some of that will be eroded, and I think that is a very dangerous path to go down. So I would plead the board to not vote for this resolution, because you already are going to consider the economic health of the county this year, and you have that power. And I understand that it's not a perfect system, and I agree, but I just am really worried about the slippery slope. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else be heard on this?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a fair point. The other reason I'm in support is I think in some ways the compensation boards muddy the waters when candidates go out and talk to voters. Oh, I didn't give myself a raise. It was a compensation board that suggested that. I didn't have anything to do with that. And I think by cutting out that layer, I think it makes us more accountable to the people that are voting for us. Nobody can go out and play the game of, well, the compensation board said that I should get 30, so I only got 15. So the supervisors did a pretty good job of keeping my salary lower. I think that layer of accountability, I don't know that it serves the taxpayer well in terms of how things are communicated with them. So that's another reason why I support the bill. It's not just about this budget year and falling behind. It's about making, I believe, communication more transparent.
Right. The comp board doesn't cost the county any money. They do it. They're not paid, right? Is that correct? They're not. Are they paid minimally, or?
They're not paid.
They can ask for expenses they never have.
Okay. So it really doesn't cost the county any money. To me, it appears that this is trying to find a solution for a problem that doesn't necessarily exist in the way it's worded. That if the purpose is to be able to consider the economic state, it already exists. And that's exactly why the three bodies have voted against, are opposed to it. So I'll just stop there.
If I can just respond, we can consider the economic state. But remember who makes up these compensation boards, folks, unelected people who represent each elected official. So an elected official says, I would like this person to advocate, and so we have 31% that's offered. The Board of Supervisors this year, the recommendation was 22%. I don't think that was even the majority of us that recommended or asked for that. So we have 31%, 22%, again, 13%, and 9%. And the only thing we can do is lower it by an equal recommendation. So we can consider it all day long, but you all know how this game is played.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank Sheriff Sheehan for pointing out that, yes, 31%, 22%, whatever the other numbers were that were presented, were in an effort to bring these jobs up to where they reasonably should be. So yeah, you hang your hat on that 22% for the board. I wish the unions could get that kind of raise. Again, the unions would kill for that. But Mr. Taylor, you keep seemingly hanging your hat on the fact that, well, that 22%, that's what we're going to get every year. That is not true. Mr. Sheehan is not going to get 31% every year.
No, and
Mr. Gill is probably not, excuse me, Sheriff, but Mr. Gill is probably not going to get his, whatever it was, every year. The point was, when I was trying to bring this up, was to bring some parity due to inflation that is beyond our control and bring some of these jobs and some of these compensations up to where they should be, because we've been chronically, perennially, for decades behind where we should be. And yes, I'm going to use the word comparables, which I think you think is some kind of a swear word or some satanic word, but it says right in the comp board and the code, comparables. And it says it, I think, more than once.
Yeah,
So, yes, we're far behind because of
and just I
this
just wanna
ongoing
be
mess.
On record again, and I know I stated it last week when we were talking about this, but the 31, I know the sheriff has the target on his back because of the 31.15 or 35, whatever it was, 31 point, whatever it is. But I would remind everybody that the comp board followed the law. And in this case, the auditor presented a very detailed packet to the comp board. So if what was being asked in some of the resolutions, and I don't have the numbers memorized, this comp board this year did that. I think the comp board here, at least in the 2 times I've been involved, acted very responsibly and professionally and followed the law. And again, I think it's important to maintain that autonomy, but just so that the public doesn't feel that I'm standing up here and that I somehow, am I in support of the 31.35% for the sheriff of Woodbury County? 100%, absolutely. And on March 29th, I'll be prepared to debate it until midnight if we need to. I have no problem standing behind that raise because it is fair, it is equitable for the people that are underneath me, and for the job that's done. In comparison, which you've asked for comparables in other departments, it is not out of line. It will get caught up because of the decisions that have been made by prior boards, and that's, I just think, fair to be totally transparent. You know, am I in favor of it? Absolutely, but it followed the law.
Go ahead, sir.
Pat Gill, Woodbury County Auditor. I've always been a staunch defender of the autonomy of the independent elected officials. What this does is makes us employees of the Board of Supervisors. It takes away any buffer between the Board of Supervisors. Joshua, have you looked at this bill? Are you familiar with it?
I'm aware of it. I haven't looked at the provisions closely.
Okay, the scenario that the sheriff talked about was that if weaponized it or went after a supervisor or a elected official. And Mr. Wright said that, well, litigation would prevent that. That's ridiculous to say that. Why would litigation protect that? I corresponded with the executive board of the auditors affiliate this weekend, and I expressed to them, Woodbury County right now, this is the worst case scenario, because I, as an elected official, doing my duty, had to sit before, in those chairs, conduct a hearing where a supervisor's registration was challenged, and I had to rule on that. And I ruled on it with the best of my ability, the evidence that was presented. And that supervisor resigned as a result of that. Now that supervisor
Point of order, Mr.
sits
Chair.
on this one. No, we're talking about
Mr.
weaponizing
Gill,
what could occur.
Mr. Gill, our subject matter right now is a resolution on whether or not the compensation board should be the one. Bringing up, and you know what you're doing right now, and there are things that have happened lately that I would not dare to bring up. It's inappropriate. I think you know that, And I think that what
We'll
you're
have a
doing
ruling
right
from
now
the
is
chair.
inappropriate,
Ask
Mr.
for a
Gill.
ruling from the chair.
I will ask for a ruling from the chair whether he can keep his remarks instead of making them personal.
No, I'm telling
Yes,
you about
you know what you're
actually
doing,
occurred.
Pat. Come on.
What
I'd prefer if we could not have something personal, but to the point.
What occurred. It's a worst-case scenario. It is that you can go after an elected official.
As you're doing
because
now.
you don't like the way that they perform the duties of their job.
Thank you for
That's
proving the point.
weaponized. And that takes away all the autonomy. I've been in office for 25 years. The first 6 months of my office, I was FBI and the DCI came into my office and started an investigation that peripherally involved a supervisor. And that was because when I came into this office, I wondered why they are independent elected positions. And it dawned on me, it was made me well aware why they are independent. And that's because we have to perform our jobs, and sometimes it involves supervisors. We had, you could go the treasurer, maybe a supervisor or board of supervisors doesn't like the way the treasurer is placing investments within the county, in the community. Those are the types of things that can occur. Or a supervisor is contracting with the county and something happens that it wasn't done properly. Somebody, an independent elected official, has to bring that to the attention of the public. Now, when we're at the mercy of the Board of Supervisors, it gives you pause. And to think that litigation is going to save you, that's 3 or 4 years down the line. Expensive to do that. You be careful what you wish for. This is what Chris Godfrey, the Workers' Compensation Commissioner, he wouldn't resign. He was 6 years into his term, and Governor Branstad was elected and asked him to resign. He wouldn't resign. So he cut his pay by 30%. It did result in litigation, but in the end, the governor was upheld. That doesn't prevent you from doing the same thing.
I would just respond that if any of that nonsense is going on around here, that we need to have people, we need to have, again, get the media involved, and the opposing party needs to be shouting those things from the rooftops. And I'll be in the front row condemning those individuals, because that stuff does not fly.
Just right now, the Compensation Board provides that buffer. They do it by comparables. It's specifically in the code. And you folks keep bringing up about the 31% with the sheriff. And as the sheriff said, and as I said last time, the Compensation Board complied with the law. The legislature set that a specific duty, said the Compensation Board shall set his salary comparable to Davenport, to a city police department of the same population. And that's what they did. That's what Supervisor Taylor said, is that they did comply with the law this year. And that's a one-time event if you follow if you go along with that. It'll come back next year if you decided not to do that, because it says you shall set at that rate.
Why is it wishful thinking to expect the public to pay attention to what's going on and to have the opposing party challenge any of that kind of stuff that might occur in the future? And then the other thing, last point I want to make is, when we walk out those doors, in some ways, I think the people in this room right now, I think we're somewhat of a second class, okay? 99% of the people that work outside of the courthouse, the public sphere, they don't get this deal. They don't have a compensation. Forget the unions. Forget everybody who's working in the private sector. Think daycare workers here in town. They don't have anyone who every year is going to go and advocate for a higher salary for them. It doesn't happen. I want elected officials to be more similar to private citizens than different. And this is one area where I see a vast discrepancy between how we're treated as public employees versus people that aren't in the public sphere. And that's another reason why I'm in support of this. It's not about it's not about 31%. It's not about 22%. Those numbers. My hope is that we become comparable, that we raise those salaries, but not in a single year. I don't think that can happen in 1 year. But that's a separate point. But my concern is, again, nobody else gets that deal. And how is that fair to the 99% of folks that don't do this? And I get it's about choices. It's about the choices that we make. We chose to run. You chose to run. I choose to be a teacher, so I'm working in the public sphere right now. Everyone who's doing the job, many people who are in this room are working in the public sphere. We made that choice. But there are some other benefits to that. So we've had a lot of conversation lately about the things that right now maybe are not to our benefit. But let's remember some of the things that to our benefit. The fact that some of us are going to be done on our last day. By God's grace, we're going to live another 20 or 25 years. We're going to continue to be paid after our very last day of work because of the position that we're in. How many people get that deal? And I get that I would love to make $115,000 a year as a school teacher. But I knew going in that was not the reality. And I would like for us all to bear in mind the benefits the economic benefits that come along with the positions that we have, and how in many ways we got a much better deal than many of the people that are going to the polls.
I'm simply going to go back to the point is that this destroys the autonomy of the independent elected officials. It would give you pause as an elected official if there is something that's going to go against the grain for the Board of Supervisors in the performance of our duties. It gives you pause, and it takes away that autonomy, and it puts us at the mercy of the Board of Supervisors. Right now we have a buffer, and it's spelled out very clearly, and as Supervisor Taylor said, the comp board followed the law. They complied with the law this year. Disagrees with what that law is. I disagree with trying to take away that compensation board because of the fear that it strips elected officials of their autonomy. It's a big issue. Be careful what you wish for. You can treat each one of these elected officials differently. Doesn't make any difference. If the 3 board members all of a sudden get it on for one of the elected officials, you can force that elected official out of office by your actions. That's what this law allows you to do. This bill would allow you to do that. That's my point. It strips elected officials of their autonomy. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh,
Tony Mayor, Sheriff's Office. Justin, I'm not here to ridicule you. You've only been here a couple years. Been here 30. I know of 2 sheriffs that have been threatened by board members and lost their budget and were frozen budget for years because they didn't do what the board wanted. None of you guys, years ago. I watched another board member sit there and scream at the sheriff. He wanted a deputy fired, and the sheriff wouldn't do it. Didn't need to be fired, but that board member's family thought they did. And we start talking about losing autonomy. That's great. I'm gonna let you guys argue that. But now, Sheriff Sheehan gets an order from you to do something, and he says no, and next year, yeah, you can sue, you can do all that. He's still going to be gone. Deputies could be fired. So I just think you're a little naive that it doesn't happen. I've seen it happen here. It happens here. And to say you're going to litigate it, that's great, but that's years down the road. And that's all I'm going to say. You haven't been around. That's all I got to say.
Jeremy, did you have something you wanted to say earlier?
On record, I agree with Pat. As far as the compensation board followed the law is obviously flawed and puts property taxpayers on the back burner. I think they deserve a better deal than they're getting right now. We could do that, by the way, to anyone's budget. We never have. There's never been anything Mr. Gill has come forward with that I believe I haven't supported, because I think he does a good job at the different things that he's offered to make this local government more transparent. We could do that in a variety of ways, but having a system like this, to me, is in need of serious reform. That's why I think the legislature is taking it up. And I don't believe that it erodes all autonomy and that people will be targeted and all the doomsday stuff.
Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you. I'm just in awe seeing this debate. I'm learning very good. Yes, there always are elections. The Board of Supervisors are servants, I remind you. You serve the people. The people are your bosses, not yours. You don't have the autonomy. Whatever you want to do, you need to survey and ask the citizens of the county. So, in reference to the camp board, I never heard about camp board, just here. And I have a, no degree, but I took human resources at Prior Cliff. Who camp board for the Board of Supervisors? I never heard of that. But yes, I think that, it's overpaid. It has to be comparable for whatever city. No. It shouldn't be a camp board. It shouldn't be just, to me, as a servant, it should be just a stipend, just to come and serve the people. Everyone in this county wants your job because you're well paid. $50,000 plus or $40,000 plus benefits, and the benefits are stellar. Good benefits. Everybody wants the job. I will do this job for free because I'm retired and I like good government. I like policy. I wanted to serve the people. That's what you should be doing. And there are always elections. If the people don't like what you're doing, your job, they board you out. So I thank you for all this discussion because that's a good learning for me.
So I guess to the point of what we're talking about on House File 2430, I mean, I'm trying to read it on their website here. It seems like there's still some missing language. How long before do you think they have an actual, bill they're going to vote on?
Well, the bill's out of committee right now. It's passed committee and can be placed onto the floor on the calendar at any time. It may be amended to include deputies going up to 95%, but I think the intent of the bill is clear, that it'll allow supervisors to keep the compensation board or to act in behalf of the, in my opinion, taxpayers in order to be able to look at the economic health and other factors.
And I don't know
Can you come to the microphone? Sorry.
I don't know the rules of order. Is it possible to delay any type of vote on this resolution until there is final language that then you all know exactly what you're?
I mean, that's
I didn't
kind of
know if
why I
that was-
bring it up,
that's-
because I always hate to lobby the legislature on behalf of stuff, but I mean, I do it occasionally. Obviously, we did on, the pipeline stuff, but.
I thought maybe that's where you were going. I didn't know if that's something that is.
I mean, I haven't heard from Matthew yet, but, he's been the quiet observer today. I wasn't insulting.
No.
Okay. Did you want, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll say something, but were you,
Basically, the point I'm getting at is, in reading this, personally, I don't know if it's like an improvement yet, I see you can choose as a county, which is probably a good thing. I don't know that that's necessarily the route I'd want to go, but go ahead.
okay. So I have been observing what I think has become a fairly destructive conversation. It seems like a lot of this is more geared toward March 29th, and this battle will be hashed at that point already. To Mr. Raddick's point, the options are potentially a good thing. I think that's why ISACS is registered in favor of it. More options is always better. Yes, ISACS, sorry. Yes, the affiliate. Yes. And there's that division with ISAC, the main. Generally, as Mr. Raddick said again, don't like to wade into pending legislation. I think the board just gets beat up on both sides, and then the legislature does what they want anyway. With these organizations already registering, I think that carries more weight with the legislature than one county, but I could be wrong. When there's an issue like eminent domain that's come up and there's clear unanimous support, I think it's healthy. There's some parts of this bill as proposed that I like and some that I don't. To the point of the differences on the comp board recommending different levels for different elected officials, we have to reduce by the same. I mean, do I like that from a budget standpoint and just from trying to explain it to people like the last speaker who've never heard of the comp board? Of course not. I don't like that, having to explain how that unique process works and how we can't do this because it would affect another. But on the other end, does Mr. Gill have a point? I think he does. And then there's, pending amendments about the going up to 95%, which I think would be another good option given to elected officials. Long story short, at first blush, this is, this looks okay, but based on the discussion in our county, I don't think it's a constructive discussion, and I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's going to have an impact at the legislature, and I don't think it should come to a vote personally because, like I said, it's just getting beat up on both sides, and then the legislature does whatever they want. But if it does come to a vote, I'll be opposed.
If I may, since I brought it forward, actually, I think I've spoken more than once, so I'd rather have Todd speak first.
Todd Harlow. You say a 31% raise is too high and to give it all at once. How long have you been on the board, Jeremy?
I think Justin said don't give it all at once,
No,
but I've been on the board for 8 years.
You've been on the board longer than him.
Yes, 8 years.
And you say you can't give it all at once. Well, you've been on the board how long?
8 years.
Okay. So what have you done in the 8 years?
I think I've given fair and comparable.
No, because they're 31% behind, so you have it. You say you want to do it, but you just keep pushing it off and off.
But if I can respond, Todd, I didn't realize that in order to be fair and comparable, I had to look at the city of Sioux City. And
You use that as an excuse every time.
It's not,
It is.
because listen, if I knew that in order to be fair and comparable, I had to look at Rex Mueller, and Rex Mueller shouldn't make as much as the sheriff, or should be equal. Next year, if Rex makes 180, it's going to be the same thing, and you're all going to stay within the system of saying, look, it's now unfair, and you have to, and the comp board will do exactly as Mr. Gill alluded to, and they will follow the law, and we will all fall in line, and everyone will have this system that is, for the average school teacher, if you're making $100,000 or more, which that's who we're talking about this year, and you're receiving between 6 and 30%, outside of these walls, that's not reality. Inside these walls and talking to each other, I know that's real. It's not for your average school teacher. I know 3% would be a huge thing for you.
And you talk about the union, well, you're the one who gives them a raise.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you give them 2%, 2.5, 3.7.
We've never gone to arbitration in my 8 years.
Well, and the unions do get an advocate in their rep.
Yeah.
And a 10%
But it's
raise
you guys that are holding them back. I mean, you always say we're behind, You know that, but yeah, you don't give them a decent raise.
And what would a decent raise be this
Well, I
year?
don't know, get them up to where they should be. I gave you comparables. You didn't do anything with those. So,
So the 8 to 10%, this is where property taxpayers are the forgotten man.
I'm a taxpayer too.
I understand that, but the 10% this year, right now, we're not even at 0%, which has been misstated in the last 2 weeks because of what we've done. We're not. We're gonna have to cut by 156,000.
No, that's inaccurate.
It's not, I'd ask her, but,
You can use, well, you can also use reserves.
oh, sure, you can go into the one-time
23%, and
emergency.
the county policy is 20%. And I'll have numbers. I mean, believe me, we've given enough back in the last 5 years just out of our medical fund, which is a discretionary fund that we could spend to zero every year. We've given enough back in the last 5 years. I got the numbers today. I ran them by Dennis. We've given enough back in the last 5 years to cover the elected official raise it's already plugged in the budget right now. It would cover the $1,000 that you gave to 100 of our employees, which was an estimate at 100,000, plus the 14,000 to cover the wage benefit or the wage plan and the salaried employees. We've given more back than all of that combined, and all that money went into reserves. So I just want to make sure that, for the sake of transparency to the voters, as a fiscal conservative, we have continued to pinch those pennies and give back, give back, give back. And if it follows suit in fiscal year 2023, we're probably going to give back somewhere around 60 or 65,000 again this year. The average over the last 5 years, I think, was 67 or 60, I don't remember, 67, 68,000. So you can do it with a 0% tax rate increase. You would just have to maybe use a few $100,000 out of reserves, which we've given you at least $340,000 in the last 5 years out of the sheriff's budget. I'll have the documents. It's not debatable. It is what it is.
Now we're getting out in the weeds here. I mean, obviously, like, our reserves are, again, something we need to also store up. We've spent down our reserves quite a bit considerably over the last 3 or 4 years, and we might have a potential to use that for funding a facility if other sources fall through. So we need to build our reserves. So that's a separate topic. Personally, I'm not in favor of voting on this today. I'd like to see more finalized language. And I'm not sure, like you said, I mean, the state legislature is going to do whatever they want anyway. At this point, I think it would fail 2 to 3. Do you still want to make a motion on it?
I do. I want to be able to look taxpayers in the eye and when asked, why did you not look and try to reform the system? I've been on the losing side of votes before, so I'm okay with that. With that, I'd move the resolution as written.
All right, so we have a motion by Taylor,
Yeah, for record.
second by Wright, and you want that as a roll call?
Yes, please.
DeWitt?
Nay.
Taylor?
Aye.
Ung?
Nay.
Wright? Aye. Ready.
Nay. All right, we're going to move on to 13B, approval memorandum of understanding between Woodbury County's Board of Supervisors, Conservation Board, and Secondary Roads Department regarding future uses of the Preseason property. Go ahead and take it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think I've used my allotment of words for the night, so I'm going to defer to Supervisor Ung. But this is an MOU regarding the Conservation Board, Secondary Roads, and the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Ung, do you want to use your allotment?
Allotment. I think we've had this discussion a few different times before. The MOU itself probably hasn't changed from what is being asked of the board. There were previous discussions, and obviously that not being inked at the time would mean it would come before the board at this time. This is something that's, far in advance, but people like to plan ahead, and so we've, delayed action on this, I believe, to give some opportunity to look at the feasibility of alternate ideas for this land. And I hope in that time that anyone supportive of specifically different developments would have approached the board by now, or would approach the board, or would let us know exactly what, what the likelihood is there. But barring that, I think conservation deserves an audience and an answer. And I think that's why this is on the agenda today. So.
I mean, I'm trying to see back when we just last had this on the agenda, but I mean, I do have a scheduled meeting out in Correctionville to meet with their council. I think it was March 14th. I'd have to double check that schedule to talk with them and discuss feasibility yet on water and wastewater supply to that area. I did talk with Joshua too about whether or not that would be a usable source, because the water and sewer would actually be out in the county and not in Correctionville. And Josh, can you speak to that?
In relation to possibly using ARPA funds?
Time, I don't even remember. I'm trying to find it on the agenda here. But, we've taken steps, or I've taken steps, to try to determine some feasibility. I also have reached out to different development companies, 10 different ones. A couple said they only do commercial development. 2 says that they're going to get back to me, and then all the rest of them are like overly thrilled by the idea. They think it's a very smart idea. They think that it would be very good development. Some saying I took some of their comments, and I guess I'd say this is a viable project. There's nothing like it for miles. The valley is really quite beautiful, and the location is really improved now that Highway 20 is done. I know I've heard the line that I'm not going to live next to a gravel pit, but that opinion might change once it becomes visual. I don't think there's a lot of local vision, so that's probably the biggest limiting factor right now. I'd be willing to work on that with outside assistance, starting with the Town Council and Chamber of Commerce. Beyond that, there's typical amount of small thinking locally, but I don't consider that to be a deal breaker. Actually, I'm quite impressed with Anthon's recent economic progress, and other small towns the county may have seen improvements to.
What developer is this, Keith?
I know they preferred to keep quiet. I can give you their names. Another one says, yes, I believe this development's feasible. I also see a need for this in Woodbury County. I believe there is a demand for lakefront property like this. Your question of value as far as what this would be worth I'd need to be a little more specific to answer that question. I believe you have a very good idea that would be successful, and happy to meet with you to discuss it further. Another person was willing to put just the lot value anywhere from $50,000 to $125,000 without a house on it. I got a message back from somebody else today that he says he's not interested in doing the development because he's working more in Sioux Falls lately, but he thinks it's a great idea as well. Other backup, you can have this. I went to Google to check reviews on lakes in the state of Iowa, and there's lakes that have developments and lakes that don't. The lakes with developments tend to get more reviews. They tend to be quite a bit higher. The only outlier was Big Creek Lake that doesn't have any housing on the lake, but it does have large public dock rental where they get a lot of public use because of that. It was interesting in the roundtable discussion this morning with the governor of Nebraska when he was asked about quality of life and amenities and bringing people to the state. He proposed a lake project north of Omaha with housing in a state park. I just thought it was kind of interesting that the state governor stole my idea is what I think. But
Mr. Chairman, would this lake be big enough to support boating?
Yeah, 75 acres would be big enough. I mean, it's kind of an extent of what you expect to boat on a smaller lake, but it's, in general, when you have people living on the property, you have buy-in. And these kind of properties aren't going to be cheap, and they're going to be valued high. So those tend to be people that really like to take care of their property and spend more on it. So, I mean, I call this the low-hanging fruit of development. You know, I see where we can create an amenity by building a bigger lake and help out conservation, get them water and sewer in the process of doing this, and we excavate the gravel with these funds. So I think it's kind of like a win-win-win all the right way around, and I think it will help the park more than it hurts it, and, you know, we can disagree on that. But, you know, that's where, you know, moving forward, I'd like to work with you guys on it. But, you know, I did highlight some of the comments as, you know, as far as what the one-star reviews on the lakes that didn't have any people living on them. I didn't bring my motorboat, but glad I didn't, because there was so much driftwood everywhere. I wouldn't have been able to, it wouldn't have been safe for pulling a tube. You know, it's, you know, algae, dog poop, all these other things that people said were, you know, in the way. And I think that this is a better plan for that area. That's just, you know, we have the ARPA funds. I think we can use those to do this, and I think we work together on it, and I think we can get it done. And I do think this is the low-hanging fruit of development. I mean, if look at any other county ground, the only other thing I think that's developable that we own is that triangle down by Prairie Hills, or if we wanted to actually do a retrofit of Prairie Hills, although that would be expensive now that the utilities have been off for 4 years or whatever. But that's just my opinion. You know, as a board, we make a decision, so I don't feel like we've given enough time to really visit it, and I didn't want to see this back on the agenda, but as the chair, I am willing to do that if that's the board direction, so.
Mr. Chairman, were you at the meetings where this was discussed in the past?
What do you mean?
When it was discussed about purchasing the property, mining the gravel out of it, and then handing it over to conservation. Were you at those meetings?
There was only one meeting that I remember. It was in closed session, and there was discussion of whether or not we should purchase the property. And it was presented as the only option in that meeting.
Were you there?
I was there.
Do you remember the board consensus at the time was to hand it to conservation?
Well, no, because the board,
I
okay.
think my word means something, and that's what
Okay.
I proposed at
Now,
the time.
if you were making that motion in a closed session, that is a violation of open meetings laws. Because the only thing we could discuss at that meeting was whether or not we were going to buy that land. So there was no discussion of whether or not we were going to buy it, then give it to these guys down the road. They said that as an option that we could do, but that is not whether or not we were, yes, going to buy it, or no, not going to buy it. And what we were willing to pay for it. Because those were the things discussed. Go ahead.
So just a couple of thoughts. First, I don't think there was a formal motion, but I think that there was some understanding, if that's fair, or some, I don't know if a gentleman's agreement or whatever it is. And that's not a motion, and that's not formal, and you're right in that. So I do think that there was, that was sort of the shared understanding of the board. And you're right, because there was no other alternative. I've been open to, if there was all of a sudden an alternative, some private developer, the city of Correctionville, and this thing has legs, and here's what it looks like, and here are the renderings and the drawings. And I actually like that you're, you know, thinking outside the box. I just don't see those things actually in front of us. I feel like we, meaning more you.
How much time do I get? Just 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks?
Well, I think we've discussed this since we took this up in closed session. It hasn't been 2 or 3 weeks. It's been months and months
Sure.
and months. But I feel like we're going out and, or I say we, but you know, trying to kind of solicit or push or see if the city of Correctionville or these private developers may want to do this. I do sit on the conservation board. I've been appreciative of their comments and looking at their long-range plan, and see that there's value in coming to fruition with that long-term plan. So that's why I want it on the agenda, and I do want to commend you for putting something you disagree with on the agenda, because I know that's not easy.
And again, to meet with Correctionville, don't meet very often. I think this is the first city council meeting they've had since our last discussion, so.
But did they call you and say, we want you to come because we've got this, or did you?
No,
ask?
we had to reach out. They're not gonna call us and say that, you know.
One of the board members reached out to me and told me that they were planning on putting opposition to it.
That's fine. That's
It's
what
fine.
free
I'm just
speech
telling you
is.
that They did reach out to me,
Sure.
at least.
Yeah.
So I know it's fine.
Can I speak?
Go ahead.
Dan Heisel, Director of the Woodbury County Conservation Board, and I do have Chairman of my board, Neil Stockfleth here. He came in after work and has patiently waited.
We're sorry.
But I guess before, I know he wants to get up and speak, and I'm here as a servant of my board, and I appreciate last month when this was discussed at our board meeting, my board asked why it wasn't passed. And we talked about the previous meetings that Supervisor DeWitt brought up when we were in closed session and understandings, what can we do with the property. And Supervisor Taylor, being our liaison, said, I will bring that back to the supervisors, and he did. So here we are, and I appreciate that. Thank you. I want to clarify a couple things. When we talk about a lake, 60 acres and 75 acres is not a lake. Browns Lake is 300 acres. Have you been to Browns Lake during the summer when they're trying to ski, jet ski, and run power boats? It is a zoo. We've had in the last 3 years 2 accidents, fatality. It's not a big enough lake, but it still happens there. If you have a 75 acre, which I highly doubt that we're going to get 75 acres of water, surface water, when we're done, because we don't even know where the gravel goes. So you're going to have to go in and over excavate to make a 75 acre lake without any return on gravel. That's my concern. So when I look at it, and I applaud for what you're trying to do. You and I have had this discussion. I respect your opinion. We've sat there and talked. On a 75 acre lake with a housing development trail that is right next to the river, that this pond will be up against, you will not have a wake. You will have to have a no wake zone. And I will fight that, because when you have wake from boats, you go down to Browns Lake. That's why we did phase 1, phase 2 to protect shoreline. It was getting eaten away from all the wave action. We still have that effect. The new jetty that was put in on phase 1, all the riprap and the fines that got washed away from boat action. We had to go in and redesign and put more riprap, widen it, because all the wave action from the boats. So you got to look at that, Keith. Don't be telling people they're going to be able to boat on that and ski, because 75 acres, it might be the shape of that lake that you can't get a boat up on plane. I just want to warn you, caution you on that. So, and if we're helping manage that, I'm speaking for myself, not my board, but I'd like Neil to step up. But I will advocate against power boats. Most of our lakes, small lakes, electric motors only, you know, so you can go out and fish, recreate, not have it all tore up in the sediment, you know, the turbidity and the shoreline getting broken down. That's the types of things. And as a gravel pit area, you're not going to have good soil to hold those banks. So boat action is going to tear them up. And it's going to tear up our trail, eat away at our trail towards the river. And I don't want to have to armor and rip wrap that. And that doesn't look good either. So those are just a few things, but I appreciate you putting this back on, Supervisor Taylor, and I'm going to yield to my chairman.
I'd like to speak as well. Neil Stockleth, County Conservation Board member. Woodbury County's got one of the premier outdoor county conservation programs in the state of Iowa. And I think that as a board, we've worked diligently over the last several years putting some properties together to enhance that. Across the state of Iowa, Iowa has probably some of the smallest percentage of public-owned ground in the union. I mean, there's just not a lot of public-owned recreational ground out there. And so that's one of the things we've been working towards, is making those opportunities available. And through efforts of Dan and some funding that he's been able to tap into, we have expanded those resources. And so when we start talking about this particular property, the Brazy property, I was there the day of the sale. I know from the agreement at the time, it was fairly clear, it was pretty clear to the County Conservation Board that this was a mutual agreement, that once the county engineer and the county had mined out the gravel, it was going to be handed off and not given, but purchased at market value by the County Conservation Board for enhancement and development of the Little Sioux Park area down there. And we start talking about Little Sioux Park. It's one of the premier parks. When people want to go camping, they go to Little Sioux Park. We see this as an opportunity to further enhance that area down there. With the trail to Correctionville and all that, this is a wonderful opportunity ahead of us to do some long-term planning and development. So I guess I encourage you to sign this memo of understanding. We think that County Conservation Board lands made available to the public have great value. There's not enough of it, and this is an opportunity to enhance that. So again, I encourage you to sign this memo of understanding, and down the road, as boards change, and this, I've been a very big advocate of this, and Dan knows this, I push, why don't we get this signed? Because as boards change, your board membership changes, our board membership changes, leaders of our organization change. I want to have this on record that says there is an understanding, there is a signed agreement that says when the time comes, if the county's done graveling this, that it's available to the County Conservation Board to purchase to enhance for outdoor recreation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else to be heard on it?
Supervisor DeWitt said you had been contacted. I've gotten email, some texts and phone calls. Have you been contacted by people from Correctionville? Anybody? You have? One. Just one? Okay.
Don.
Yep. Okay. He's not the only one I'm talking about. But, I was surprised that they weren't here today, some of them that had talked. So maybe they were planning on attending that March 14th city council meeting, Keith. So
Sure.
I just had a question on that of how much.
Well, I mean, I like it to be a fair proposal, you know, but, you know, I get how it is. I understand.
As we talk, this is a 5-year process, at least on the Breezy end, and another 10 to 15 between the park and Breezy. I get that, I understand that, but I also know that my board's desire to have a signature, so that's why I think Supervisor Taylor brought it back. So I guess the decision's going to be in your hands, and I'll respect your decision. So thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move to approve the MOU between Woodbury County's Board of Supervisors, Conservation Board, and Secondary Roads Department regarding future uses of the Breezy property. And with that said, I do want to commend you for two things. One is I know it's difficult being the chair and putting on something that you don't agree with, but I also like that we can disagree without being disagreeable. So,
Motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. Any further discussion on this item? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. That passes 3-2. All right. Moving on to item 14, board committee meetings.
Mark gave me our original.
Just have one.
We get a copy from him later.
You had one, you said?
Yeah.
No.
I'll just get a copy.
No, I was talking to him, sorry.
At a Rolling Hills, thank you, Neil. At a Rolling Hills telephonic/Zoom meeting, and won't be too long-winded, but two things. There was a Crittenden Center funding request that was quite a bit of money. It got pared down to about $35,000 in order to train present staff because of the clientele that they're receiving are in need of services. And so rather than bringing in others, they will train from within. And we also talked about, we have some personnel changes. Ann Landers will be retiring. And so she has processed claims historically as of June 30th. And so Dawn would like to hire a person to be a claims processor, administrative assistant. We're going to be meeting on that and coming up with a recommendation as kind of an ad hoc committee. So I continue to really appreciate Rolling Hills.
Any
all I've got.
committees from you guys down here? Industrial Roundtable was held today with the Chamber of Commerce. David Gleiser and I attended as the representatives as the county. We did, we're going to need a bigger trophy case, probably, Karen, aren't we? We got another take-home present here of the #1 top metro, and just wanted to say, in your face, Bowling Green. No, I'm just kidding. Just very appreciative to win, and part of that is because of all the people willing to invest in the Siouxland Metro, keep their businesses here. We get to get up there and accept the trophy, but it's because of the people that make the investments in our community and the hard work being done here that we look good on a nationwide scale, and we thank you. Moving on to citizen concerns, round 2. Come on up, Tony.
I have a great. When do you guys get the new sound system?
It's a supply chain, shipping issues for all the equipment. It's just like what I tell all my customer furniture at the furniture store all day long, that we have no control.
This one stinks.
Yeah.
One board member talks like this. One board member talks and I'm always looking over here, and
It's a sore neck.
I didn't realize until we had to wear a mask how much I mouth read. And when you, like, I can't hear what's going on. That's my gripe. That's all I.
And what do we say, May, June? What do we?
How are we all doing? Can you guys?
Latest in July.
No, now we're back to July.
It started with May.
Sure.
And they pushed it to June, now it's been pushed to
The
July.
good news is, like, if you watch the videos, it picks up well.
Yes.
But like back there, especially like if you, like I had difficulty with what would you say, like secondary noise. That's why most of the time I
High pitched voices?
No, it's, I can't hear when there's secondary noise. It's just a hearing.
Because these things, but then the microphones are very good.
Can I make one comment? I just want to applaud Andy, because Andy, whatever you're doing with all of this is really, without you, we wouldn't even be able to hear from here to there. So thank you on short notice for patching in people from Des Moines and everything else. So thank you.
Any other board or citizen concerns?
I have a citizen concern.
You go ahead, sir.
It was said at a board meeting, and it has been followed up in written, is that I did not bring up the 27 pay period issue until the budget was set. Karen, would you please play? This was from the November 23rd board meeting.
Michelle Scaff, Deputy Auditor. I just wanted you to be aware, we've been working on the payroll budgeting, and fiscal year '23 is a 27 pay period year, and what that means is for salaried individuals, normally they're used to having 26 pay periods, so we divide their salary by 27, which means if there were a 0% increase, they would be getting a lower paycheck bi-weekly than they currently do. So I just wanted you to be aware of this. I know that there's some projections that I've been asked to provide as far as percentages, and that's across the wage plan, elected and percent deputies.
It doesn't go over very well. And you can't hear my comment. My comment was, it doesn't
Thank
go
you.
over very well. And
Do you have any citizen
that was true.
concerns, Mr. Gill?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so any other citizen concerns? All right, board concerns.
Item 16, board concern.
How do you know?
Who's the chair here?
Echo. So, we can't pick Andy for this. We gotta have a techie person that can be a project manager for day-to-day content on the county website. And I was gonna suggest David Gleiser, but that's not gonna be an option. So.
Why?
He's gonna be resigning, so I got a letter I don't know, this last week, so we'll be having that on our next agenda. So we are going to need somebody to do that position. I don't know if we pick somebody like Don from his office, or Karen looks really enthused about it. But we'll have to probably find somebody. And maybe if we hire a new EDCD director, maybe they have that position in mind too, to do that as well. So I wanted the board to be aware of that. Anything else for board concerns?
I'm willing to help in that process as I have in the past.
All right. I know the city uses Ann Westra, and maybe we just have her do ours too, and we give them a little bit of money for it. So, anything else? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.